All right. Well, welcome everyone to our February 5th Next Generation Advisory Board meeting. We are missing Michael from today, and then City Council Member Henderson is unavailable to attend today. So both of those two will have otherwise, I think everyone else here is accounted for. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. So with that, we are going to turn it over to public comment. Pam is over there. Hi. Hi. Are you ready for us?
Sure.
All right, you got 3 minutes on the clock.
So I'm Pam Chadbourne. I live a block or so from here, and I have a couple items. First, I see this email about Project Downtown. I'm going to say that you haven't heard adequate information about this. There's no alternatives or different scenarios offered to you. It is not in context of the city's entire obligation to the areas, all the areas of the city over time. You may or may not be aware, but you can see on the website that financial reports are available monthly. And what you will see is a pie chart and a table of 10 different economic areas. You know what? Main Street is one. We have 9 others. And you all, because you are on this board, and staff and city council have an obligation to the other 9. Do you see them on the planning anywhere? You do see that Project Downtown is like 140 million and in 5 phases. What about the other 9 areas? Do you not care about those? Next Gen, you should. And I expect you to speak up for to ask city management for the integrated timeline of the investment of the city over time in all the 10 areas. And that's essential. It keeps not being done, and somebody's got to call for it. It falls on you if the other areas decline over time because we've overinvested in Project Downtown. So I don't like this, and I suggest that you revive it. Say the Project Downtown has to be included in an overall plan for all of the city. Also, I wanted to mention that this body has, I think Michael suggested, a safe place to park. Well, this body already endorsed that. Do you have a copy of that email to city council, or that letter, that object to city council? No, you don't. It's not online. And so that should have been part of your information. And I think our staff should provide that to you. I think our management, Mike Chant, who is at another meeting tonight, the Tri-Cities meeting, Sheridan, Englewood, and Littleton, and very important, shouldn't be conflicting with your meeting. They should be providing that resource to you. You don't have to redo this work. You should look at what the board did previously and connect to that. In my opinion, that's what's valuable to the general welfare and the public. So I just want to give you a couple of those thoughts. Thanks very much.
All right. So moving on to our first agenda item, we want to say thank you everyone for your contributions to kind of the ask from last month, right? The ask was, give me roughly a paragraph or 2, some with pictures, not looking at you, but again, right, it's an area that is important. So I want to thank all of you for contributing your thoughts around that. I think one thing that, as it was kind of fun to be the recipient of all of it, right? So you all haven't seen the individualized things that came through, but it was really fun to kind of see the different stances of where we are for this. It's a big project. It's something that I think we all care deeply about. So this is a long-winded way to say thanks for providing your thoughts. Thank you for condensing them as best as possible, because I'm sure we could keep going, which is why this conversation, is kind of ongoing for us, right? There's a lot of uncertainties. There's a lot of things that I think even through the different speakers that we've had, the different conversations and discussions we've had, we're constantly learning a little more how early on it is in the planning phase. And so this is just me saying thank you. But so with that, you all have kind of a consolidated thoughts from all of us. So let's go ahead and, if you haven't already, because I know we have ample free time throughout the day, and I'm sure we've all been reading this. Let's go ahead and maybe take just a couple minutes just to kind of review, highlight things that maybe you resonate strongly with, like things that you're like, oh, I don't know about this. And then let's have a discussion about what that looks like. Because like I said, we're coming in from a lot of different passion areas, and I want us to have that conversation as this is our first kind of collection of thoughts onto paper and moving away from discussion. So we'll give us, 3 minutes just to kind of look it over, and then we'll have a little chat about it. Feeling. Let's discuss. Let's chat about it. All right. First, I want to hear, curious, is there anything that anyone read that they felt very strongly about that maybe they didn't provide initially? Any new ideas or things like that? Think about it.
I think I touched on it at the end of my long letter that I sent you. It's nice and short, and it plays into what Pam brought up, and I focused just on Geneva Glen, but I do think like the broader idea of, I think starting with Project Downtown is awesome because I do think it's like the heart of Littleton, and I think it gets people excited for investment in other areas. But I do think having that forethought of like what we're doing on the, what would that be? The eastern.
Littleton Boulevard.
Yeah, Littleton
Area
Boulevard.
Mhm.
I don't know, and I know that people have thought about it generally, but having more of a 20-30 year plan, whatever it is financially, that feeds into that Geneva Glen Village. Geneva Village, I'm sorry. Why am I thinking of Geneva Glen? I don't know. Real estate. But sorry. But just like, I think it is important to, like, Project Downtown, I think is gonna stir up interest and more investment so we can serve those other areas. And I think making sure that infrastructure spreads past just this one little area. That's it. That's my only note.
I'm curious, do you see your long letter? Like, I think when I sent mine, like, I was just like, I'm gonna like focus on it, but I'm also kind of curious to like see what else you wrote.
I can send you it.
And there's nothing wrong with your language. I want you to-
No, I was just like, that's what I was thinking through, and I was like, sorry, Ricky, let me know if you want something else.
Very apologetic. Okay, but that's a fair point, right? So thinking a little bit beyond just like, how can we make it, you know, not, and I say from the perspective of a citizen, but also thinking about like, what is the long-term benefit of this, right? And how does that kind of grow the city, rather than focusing just on what is our main hub?
Yeah, and I think something is like, how does increased profits and revenue that we're hoping to gain from this major renovation, how can like that money feed these other districts that Pam brought up, these other areas that need investment? And just seeing if staff or city councils even like thought.
So similar to like how our 3A exists, right? Because there's that subcommittee that takes place in the spring, summer, where there's the review of, you know, that spending fits within the definition of. But are you suggesting it may be something similar to that, where there's the revenue capture and reinvestment?
Yeah, I think having an idea of reinvestment that expands this general just improvement of Littleton.
What else?
I think this is like a beautiful summary of everything. And it's really well written. That being said, I think my concerns about Project Downtown, like, this feels a little repetitive of what you would read on the website of their overall goals and visions. And I think like the overall goal and vision is really strong already. But I think hearing conversations that are happening about budget, and like different opinions coming from different city council members and different people, I think my concern is we have this great idea, but it's if the execution and if the details aren't right, that nothing's gonna like, it won't be done to its fullest. And I think a lot of the times the details, they feel like minutia because they're small things, but the key is in the details is a saying for a reason. And so I think things like encouraging them to hire someone, you know, like restaurants and hotels, they hire people whose job is to say like, what's gonna draw people? And coming at it from that perspective, I think goes a long way. I also think, I don't know, I think I just like to see like, if we have like specific things, like everyone in their letter was like, trees are really important. What's the data on like why trees are important? Or,
Times.
yeah,
One of the universals, and I think, yeah, the
Yeah,
city's
maybe like-
full of that.
Honing in on like the, what, if it's 5 universals or what?
I did want to say,
I
trees, as you brought up trees, I was like, I saw the word tree.
I think we all agree with the palm trees.
yeah. And I think there's probably a bunch of other things that we all agree on too. And I think it's the specifics where we can actually add value instead of like this overarching, we want community, we want whatever, like these are important to us and here's like the data we've pulled where we've seen this successful and why we think you need to prioritize it. I think feels like a stronger insight.
I think what I feel a tension of with that is, or what I'm like kind of sensing is that like a lot of what we've heard about in presentations, a lot of what the dialogue on Project Downtown is right now is the foundation building of the process. It's talking about how city's gonna go about Project Downtown, the people they're going to like hire, like it's even that, it's like who is going to be involved in that structure. It's not even specifics of who we're gonna hire yet, but it's, yeah, what type, like the designers, like all that type of stuff. That the details are very, I agree, the details are like really important, but that's probably years in the future that like details are really being talked about. We of course still like have some like mock-ups and plans, but it's like, that's all very subject to change. So I think pitching specific detailed things is not a bad idea, but I don't think anyone's going to present to us on like super specific details at this time, because that's not really the dialogue the city's having. And so I think something we need to like, I think one thing I'm thinking about how to reframe a lot of the stuff in this letter and how we're thinking about this is like, what are we wanting to contribute to the dialogue in the city about it? We can float things we want and like that type of stuff, but that's not necessarily gonna like land and have impact and affect the process or dialogue, any of those things. So I think specific recommendations could be a thing with that, but I think that's, unless we're just saying, you know, here's our personal opinions, I think that's gonna be on us to do the research on, hey, we really think we should have a seating area at this intersection because of this critical analysis of that, if we're like gonna get the needs.
I don't think we need someone to present to us to like share an opinion, because I think like I think the story, at least last year, of this whole group is like we're 6 months behind on our suggestions all the time because things are already in the works and like getting done. And so I think that's the beauty in this is like, yeah, let's give these ideas before they're even talking about them. So we make sure that they do talk about them and that they're talking about them in a way this group aligns with, because that's kind of the point. We want project to align with the goals of the next generation.
100% agree. I was gonna say, I was also kind of same thing. Abby said, like, even if the conversations aren't happening, like I think our way of saying like these should be happening and like how like they're a priority or something.
Yeah, I want to clarify, I'm actually super on board. Like if there's stuff, I think that's where I want to say, like if there's stuff about the process that we think is either critical or is not happening, I think that's stuff that absolutely we should do. I think there's some like initial feelings of like that in the letter, but I think, and I think those are things we could pull threads on. I also want to make sure it fits in with like the dialogue of like the city. So for example, like, yeah, if we're hiring people, like that's part of the plan. It's like, it's not just city staff designing stuff. So it's like, you know, we can say, hey, we do think that step is like really important. Post to that, but I don't know if that's gonna go like shaking, making waves of like, oh, wow, they like, that's.
But I think like,
about something.
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but hiring people that designed 6th Street in Boulder or designed like the Fort Collins Square versus people that designed South Glen. Like that's important that conversation's had and that councils, whoever's making the decision, like understands the difference between those two like expensive renovations that like each got a ton of money and a ton of like interest, and 2 of them rocked it and the other one can't keep a storefront to save their lives.
I also think people are pulled in. I think like the way these things work, people are pulled in, and when money's being talked about, everything's being, like there's attention on this subject because of the phase it's in. They're talking about money and how much money they're gonna need. And like, if they're taking certain things into consideration, that helps to create a budget. And there is like this talk about with like Geneva Village right now and these other places. I also think it's like a chance for us to identify like what we feel Littleton's identity could or should be. I think this was like a great opportunity for Littleton to start building its own identity. And I think we all come from different places and have chosen this place for certain reasons. And honing in on why we chose that and how downtown Littleton can best represent that. should be going into this planning and budgeting phase. So that's kind of what I thought, like, that's kind of the direction I took with my letters, like, what's Littleton's identity moving forward? What's gonna separate it?
It's supposed to say paragraph, not letter, or it's a straight letter.
I know, it's impossible. I've lived here for 30 years, I have a lot to say. But yeah, I think I don't disagree with you that like maybe they're not gonna be putting all of it into play right away. But also, I think it's something that like, we say it now, and then next year, hopefully next gen says this again, and the year after, and it's that like repetition where there is impact instead of just like a letter here and there.
Yeah, and again, I wanna clarify, like, I don't think if we write something, it's not quote unquote relevant to a council decision for, 3-4 years, that's fine, I get that, that's probably actually kind of good. It's more looking at like what we think the dialogue around this stuff is going to be had, like from what we know about the processes, from what we know about how city and council are looking at this, and engaging with that and like making sure our recommendations, again, not fit into their exact plan, we can disagree with their plan, stuff like that, but that it's going to be relevant to their considerations rather than stuff that is just kind of like, I'd say that's like kind of my thing of the letter. I think you phrased it really well. It's like, yeah, we're kind of expressing that we agree with how the goals of the project can be fine. We're like, we have to just say that more directly. Like, we think the project's well scoped. And what else do we kind of want to say? And I think we're running into this is a very large project, and there's a lot of directions we could take. We could talk about who do we want to hire for this. That itself could probably be a very lengthy letter. We can talk about how we think the planning it should go. We could talk about how we think the community engagement should go. We can talk about specific design elements like seating and color choices and patio choices and things like that. So I think there's a step that needs to be taken to flesh out some of these like initial ideas and find where our group kind of has momentum and desire to flesh out a dialogue that's going to be a bit richer for council and staff to be able to engage with, to like leverage essentially to provide impactful input. And I think from what I saw in some of the letters, we have a lot of different scopes, and we either need to accept then that we're essentially telling council like, hey, we think there's a lot of important pieces about this, and like, please do it carefully, which is a nice idea, but like they're probably already trying to do it carefully, or kind of like dig into some of those and like pull out some analysis kind of on that in whatever ways we think are strengths lended. That makes
Sense. I think where it says like hesitation is like how we say things or like what we say given the relevance for council, where there's like a term or like longer term. It also could just be because I'm typically like a rule pusher, but me and rules, I'm like, yeah, we're gonna bend. I guess like that's the part of me, it's like, I do see immense value, even if there's things that are like immediate term, like us pushing on it, or even things that are a bit longer term, like us continuing to push on it, like. I don't feel like there's like a very, yes, there's a definite way to say things and a definite way not to say things. I think given the energy, the intensity around like this, I think like us trying to dance a line is gonna do more harm than necessary, like sharing like our actual points of view and our actual like values. And I see it's like, hey, if we have questions or we want to push on a certain area, like let's push on it. Like it may be something council's like, yep, we're thinking about this, but we're like, cool, think about it harder. Like I do think that there's value in that if it comes from a point of like points of views that we want to share and something that we really feel passionate about. So that's just my little rule bending speech.
No, I feel like I'm probably misspeaking, so I appreciate the opportunity to like clarify. Like, I think I'm not saying we have to like rule follow or like appease council to fit into their exact timelines or stuff. So like put it more explicitly, it's like, I think if we offer, if we were to offer a recommendation, for example, like saying, hey, we think the city needs to do more to integrate project downtown planning with the broader economic plan. And we kind of leave that as like, yeah, we think that's really important. And then we send that to council and they go, have you guys read the community economic development survey? And we go, no. And it's like, well, we're on top of that. If we read a whole letter, like again, not saying we're gonna do this, but it's saying, don't let city staff be the end authority of designing this. Like, we think we should like contract out a designer, and council goes, yeah, that's part of the plan. And it's like, okay, like it's not irrelevant to say, hey, we do really think the designer is really important. We really wanted to like do something like that, but like, I don't wanna like send a letter or write a lot of opinions that end up kind of just being like RD. Like, hey, we really think this part is important, and council goes like, yeah, it makes sense. Like on to the next. I want there to be some leverage, some weight there, some saying, hey, yeah, we do think trees are really important. We don't think they're getting enough attention in the plan. It's something like that. We think they are really relevant because there's data from other areas. We have our personal examples of other areas where like trees are really important, something like that. If we were to, again, kind of write a letter that says, hey, we think bike lanes are important, and not actually grapple that with like what the dialogue around multimodal transport around project downtown is. I just don't see that necessarily having the impact that I think we'd like want it to. So yeah, it's not rule following, it's not going along with like the existing plans, anything like that. I think challenging is actually probably the more impactful thing we can do. I think maybe what I was sensing in the letters a little bit is a feeling of like, if we want to challenge, it's like challenge. Let's do it right. Let's call out like the tree spacing on this street is inappropriate, and that probably reflects like a broader arborist plan, and maybe we should need like an arborist input because trees do seem so important in Littleton. We don't see that happening. That's like a critical recommendation of like, get an arborist on the project downtown planning committee. I don't know if that's actually on there or not, but like that would be an example.
I hear you. You want to make sure anything we say is actually like something they're not already doing and have discussed in detail, and we just weren't part of that conversation.
Maybe another way to say it, I guess, like, because I don't want to put it all on us, like we have to cover all our bases. Like, I just want to make sure whatever we say doesn't just get kind of easily dismissed.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, yeah,
I
that's
agree.
a nice thought by them of.
I totally agree.
I also
we should
think-
run restaurants, but like, they don't know what they're talking about, like, on with that. Like, I want to make sure we fit the level of dialogue they're having, so they go, oh, wow, they're thinking about this. Clearly, it's actually important, and they probably have some value on the opinions.
I agree. I also think, part of where maybe there's like a little disconnect is there's a lot of stuff I see on the website that I'm like, this is great. But then I hear people who've had conversations with a city council member or something, and the story maybe isn't perfectly aligned. So it's like, we have this thing on the website that covers a lot of detail. And it's like, yes, they're thinking about all these things, but is the follow through going to be there? Like, do they realize how important, like why people voted for this plan in particular? You know what I mean? Like, and I think both can be done together. I think there does need to be meat. I think providing some data points is great. I'm also like, I'm curious, like if everyone, what each person, if like had to choose one focus, what that focus would be and where there's overlap.
I agree with that statement, and I also think, sorry, I feel like I'm just. But I also like the statement earlier about when you mentioned, like, we all chose Littleton for a reason, and like, again, that's part of like the next gen board, like, want to stay in Littleton hopefully for many more reasons. And I think to your point of like, just even starting off the letter, which is like an introduction of like the different personalities and the different like stories like this group has. And then kind of like segueing that into like our specific reason or our specific like passion area for Project Downtown. I think it's again of like that destination of Littleton for a place that people can come to and the people who have lived here can continue to stay. But also to your point, like kind of bounces on top of the like thing that we really want to kind of like push the accelerator on and like, getting that focus on. And I think, like, even if there's a period of time where like, yes, we're not part of the conversation and council discuss things in great detail, like, then I still think there's value in that either one, if like, we get some communication of like what that is and like how it impacts. And then if not, I think like even just maybe asking like a staff member like to review it before we send it to council, say like, hey, is there anything in here that maybe we just weren't aware of type of thing? Like, I guess I'm not seeing that as like a barrier progressing forward, but I do think it's maybe another gut check we can do if we really are like wanting to avoid that happening.
Yeah, I also think like a good example is you see historic feel plastered all over the Project Downtown webpage. And then you also hear them talking about putting up like high rises in Geneva Village. And those things, to me, are like very conflicting feels. So maybe it's asking those questions. Where it's like, look, we see this word here, then we see this word here. We're talking about the same space and these things don't go together. So I think like some of what we talked about too was connecting this to Geneva Village and saying like, we don't want to see buildings over
3 stories.
3 stories or whatever it is. Sticking with brick facades. Like we could take that historic angle. I don't know, I'm trying to get down to more specifics because I think that's what we need.
I think the plan did a pretty good job of like looking at existing structures and going, we should build stuff like that. I think they did a pretty comprehensive survey for all the areas in the project.
Yeah, I guess I'm talking about like for Geneva Village, they're talking about doing more modern
Outside of
and that
the
are gonna
project.
be connected to it. So you wonder if they're it goes back to like how those all communicate, those different spaces.
And how they're connecting the infrastructures. If they're thinking of just this single project, or if they're actually thinking of it like, okay, we can afford this in maybe the next 5-10 years, but in the next 30 years, is it gonna be this like little pocket next to all these high rises?
I want to bring us back a little bit. Because I think this has been great, right? I think this is the first time we're actually seeing all of our discussions on paper. And as I look at this and as I've read it over and saw the thoughts coming in, this is broad, right? We don't really talk about anything like in detailed specifics. We've been trying to kind of get down to some like agreed upon, angles, but I think, what I'm hearing here is that we do value kind of the project planning part of this, right? Where I think really what we're trying to identify as we think about what do we want to submit to city council is what does this project plan look like from a budgetary standpoint? Specifically, like where are we going to allocate dollars towards consulting? Where are we going to look at FTEs, right? So like, how are we going to put money into that so we can do the things that like, we're talking about here of like having a strong position for an ARP, making sure that our construction companies, or contractors utilize materials that provide a historic value. I think those are the things as we like dig in, right? That's where we can move from, this kind of general thing of like, this is why it matters, right? I think you both make good points of, you lived here for however long, you're here, coming in, commuting from all the way up north and back and forth all the time. But part of our next gen, mission and focus is, right, how can we ensure that residents stay here? How can we make sure that people come here to spend money, to visit, go to school? Those are things that are rooted in this board. And so I think if we take some of those things and when pair with the conversation we've just had of like, what are the specifics in this project, then propose something that's a little more detailed that I think like what Bobby's recommending is also like, we want to challenge appropriately, without saying like, do all of it, and and here's why, right? We can still pull the things that matter most, like, I guess I can say it again, trees. We need to care a lot about trees in this group, and why is that, right? Is it something that we're tying back to from an experience? Is that maybe when you were little, you remember running up and down Main Street and they had beautiful shade and all these great things, and then what are the benefits of having trees in an urban area, right? I think somewhere in the book of Flex,
Mackenzie Polson.
was talking about like having like urban farms and stuff. So like, where are we pulling those data points, right? And so pull those numbers in if we want to be really specific. The other thing, right, that I'm very consciously aware of is that we are up against some timeline challenges. April, we are going to have an important. So it's important that as we think about where does this initiative go, does it have the momentum right now to carry into the months of April? Not saying that for those of us who are gonna renew or stay for our term, this has to be a 4-month discussion, right? But like, does it have momentum? Because I think when we joined, there was a project going on, and I don't think it got past the first month of saying hello to each other. So I do want to call attention to that of like, is there enough energy and passion for us to continue pushing this forward, knowing that we may not all be here come April, or do we feel like this has been a great exercise that we need the project to excel a little bit more before we really come together as a advisory board to say, yes, this is where we want to move forward with.
I think at this point, the plan is definitely concrete enough to warrant this. I don't know if we ever got more detail on like the Geneva Village plan, but I think something like that is a better example of there's not really enough detail here to make any concrete recommendations. It's sort of, but like that's the very solid beginning of like a whole plan right there. And I think that is where you start to go, well, we like this and we don't like this, and maybe not do this, or this is too expensive, or honestly, we should do way more of this. I think this is the perfect place in the plan to start doing that sort of thing.
I think it might struggle because of the weird amount of scope on this, which the whole board struggles with, because we just can manage everything a little bit. I think it might struggle to carry momentum into a new term of board members. So I think personally, as somebody who's staying on, I would prefer to see a wrapped up version, even if it's smaller than like we might originally envision, of like a lengthy letter with full recommendations, but something that is concrete and at least gives some recommendations to council, and then can be built on the future terms as the process continues to develop. I'm thinking about the waste diversion letter and trying to think of like how we could condense the scope of this into something like that. One of the things I think we could pitch is like, hey, we've had a lot of months of discussion on that. There's a lot of perspectives. This is important. We think a next gen representative and like running plans by next gen as they like go on would be a really good step. We would really prefer designers and stuff as it hires, and those like key checkpoints are made to like check in with us. Followed by whatever points we could find with like specific recommendations. So just pulling from like one tonight is like, I think it would be, I don't know if this has consensus, but like throw it out there and hope is like, we can just put a bullet point that is like, we think council should ensure that like staff is prioritizing hiring designers that take a long-term timeless perspective. Like we want to make sure that like when considering who the designer is, that they probably have some experience, relevancy, expertise in timeless design. And it's like that's a bullet point sentence. Like that could be a concrete.
I agree.
That's something that all 7 people on council might go, oh yeah, I wasn't thinking about like asking staff to look out for that, and now I might go in that presentation in a month or 3 months or a year to say, hey, staff, please make sure to like bring that information to us about like what are these people's expertise for that. Should we have an arborist sit in on some design around tree stuff, because we all like the trees, like, I think those are recommendations that are like, yeah, we can take what we've done all here, which is this like big abstract thinking and like, go, okay, well, we like trees. Anybody have ideas for recommendations on those?
I
like
also
that.
think, I really like that a lot, cause I think, I agree, like, we can overcomplicate things, and sometimes it is just as simple as like a bullet point. This matters, take the time. Just do it right. And that's all the point needs to be. I also think like with the tree thing, for example, pull up some of the data I had. I think adding data to it just might make them think about it in a different way. So I had something about trees. Businesses.
Get ready to.
Like statistically, businesses on tree-lined streets show higher income streams than similar businesses that don't have a tree canopy. And customers are more likely to spend time and money in areas with high quality landscaping. So like saying we like trees feels like fluff, but when you phrase it like that, it's like, no, this is no joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, this will affect the businesses. And the amount of time people are spending in downtown Littleton. So I think that's another way.
Yeah, I think right where even if it's, yeah, my example is something a little more concrete of like, please ask for this. It can also be something of, hey, we really want to emphasize that this thing's a prioritization. I'm just thinking of putting myself in council's shoes or staff, to be honest, who working on this, of like, what might we be able to give them to make their process thinking about this over the next few years slightly different, more impactful, whatever, more informed, more challenge. What do we think? What conceptions might they already hold that we think are wrong? Something like that. So, yeah, we could just kind of go the route too of trying to figure out an idea of how we could go about that. But I'll give that a minute of like getting 10 concrete things like that of like, hey, we really prioritize X, Y, and Z. We'd really like to see you do A, B, and C. And the preamble of like, please keep us in the loop because this is important and we want to like, we do think this is a high importance area for a next gen perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to put into that, our top 4 focus. Like, look, the interesting and cool thing about this board is that we don't have just one thing that we sit on, right? We've talked about so many things over the last 2 years, over the last 1 year, right? And so yeah, we should be able to be brought in and like, hey, this is what we're thinking, as the next gen advisory board. But what are we looking? What are we overthinking? What aren't we thinking of?
Totally.
I think that's a fair ask, and I think especially with new city council representative, right? We have that opportunity to build that relationship to say like this is an interest and want, right? The more we communicate, the more we can provide and give that feedback of conversations you're having that that's okay, right? That's what we volunteer to do. So I think that's a fair ask to say, yeah, we should be involved in that to some extent.
I also think we can get like as specific, like when we're talking about the design and stuff, like digging into like who did design the like climbing areas and playgrounds on 6th Street, and be like, hey, like this group designed these playgrounds that created these kind of sitting areas on these really successful streets. We want to make sure you're considering interviewing them to do it in Littleton. And like it takes digging, but like you can find who was the designer behind all that. And I think like sometimes people need to be told who to hire.
I also think like with these businesses and when they're planning like the different times where they're drilling into the streets, it's disrupting these businesses. And it's also like when you're doing project A, should you be putting in a tree well at that time? I mean, like things like trees, they sound like they're later on, but there needs to be a good system in place for them to have like the roots to grow and be healthy. And I'm worried that that's getting dismissed in the process, is like, yeah, they'll come, we have a lot of things going on, but it's like, but like, the structure there matters if we're worried about the health of the trees. And, yeah,
Makes me think of two things, because I think that's a very important topic, right? And it goes back to that like project planning of like, how much are you thinking about, like, it's not just redoing the road, right? But like, you know, I think about like all the construction on Colfax, right?
Thinking the same
And I think that is a data point. Again, if we're gonna be talking numbers, data points, and like, this is why it's important. About like, how does this impact businesses, you know, and like, sure, different cities, different business, but still, we're seeing that impact. You know, we're seeing the pleas for help from small businesses say like, hey, like, behind this construction, we're still open, please come in. So we should mention that. And then, you know, to your point about like thinking about trees, you know, I'll nerd out here for a second, but I, in a cooler life, was in the brewing industry, and something that Odell up in Fort Collins did, they designed their brew house to naturally expand. So when they hit a certain level of production, they can pop the roof and put in a new tank prepared for that. So thinking about that, right? Like, well, if we just redo the sidewalks and we're like, oh, shoot, we meant to put a tree in there. Now we have to tear that up, right? That's a waste of time. That's a waste of money. And that prolongs the project overall. You get something that we talked a lot about, like the importance of thinking through that to provide the bridge canopy. So I'm here for that too.
I like that.
I think generally they are thinking about stuff like that, because from the intro to the plan, it looks like this whole plan was because Denver Water went, hey, there's a bunch of lead in the pipes. We should like fix that. And they went, well, if we're gonna tear up all the sidewalks anyways, we're gonna tear everything up anyways, we might as well like do stuff, like other stuff while we're there. And they were already thinking about that. That didn't happen because of like timeline considerations.
Yeah.
Cause they're like, oh, you're 2026, no, we gotta go way sooner than that. So like, I don't think it's fair to say, well, clearly the project management office isn't thinking about this, but like, I think they're generally thinking about stuff like that.
I've seen a lot of stuff.
Right. At the very least, right, like more transparency around like, this is what we're, like, the city is planning and the project timeline is looking like. I think that's where, you know, maybe going back to that current, Alex, you might be a better researcher than most of us here, but, you know, to that extent, right? And I
That
think
was just like on like slide 2 of the plan.
memory.
I
I also don't feel like I've seen a lot of stuff being done to sidewalk, like, there's been a ton of construction in downtown Littleton this past year, or
Where?
2 years, on Main Street.
Yeah, that was they put like new pipes in.
I know, but like, that's what I'm saying, there weren't, a lot of the like poles for trees were filled in. I don't think that some of that prep was happening, I guess is my point, like, this may have been like, I don't see those things happening in conjunction. So they may be thinking about it more, but based on some of the conversations I've had with different city council members and also just business owners who are talking about what's happening out in front of their shops, I'm not 100%.
I also think
sure.
like people just assume that people are thinking about, like, there's the experts and you just assume like there's no way they're gonna do this wrong, or and people don't think, and it's like no slight on anyone. It's just, it's hard to think of all of it. And so even if they are thinking of it, it doesn't hurt to reinforce and be like, this is important. Like, you would expect a professional GC to paint before installing brand new carpet, but that's not always the case. Like,
If you're speaking from experience. But I mean, I don't think you're wrong, but I do think that's where like, that's why we have local governments, right? Because we do put the people in place to make those decisions, because otherwise, you know, you'd have thousands of people saying like, this is the way it should be done, because I saw it on YouTube one time, right? Or whatever, and you know, maybe that's where that paint after carpet install. But either way, right, I think that maybe is where I'm thinking of, you know, that communication piece, is that maybe it's really just boiling down to like, I was thinking about like the, you know, the downtown business chamber, right? They consulted on this. And those are things that we could also challenge, right? Of saying like, are you talking to them regularly? You know, have you pulsed what they're thinking? Have you vetted their concerns, right? That's where thinking about the next generation advisory is like, well, business goes out, right? What's coming in there? Is that a key business, or is that one that, you know, we're allowed to part with? You walk up and down Main Street, there's a lot of vacancies right now. But I know we've all talked about some of that too. But like, those are where those concerns should be.
I think your point about Colfax too is really interesting. And we're planning this long phase by phase construction. And when an area is under construction year after year after year, it loses all its momentum. So it's like, how are there ways to section off instead of doing, and a lot of them probably wouldn't work like you would. You do the pipes, you want to do all the pipes at the same time, but where you can, I don't know if there's a different way to think about it when they're doing certain things where it helps those businesses.
I'm gonna pitch, and I'm welcome to be shut down on this. And I'm gonna not pick any, I'm just using this as an example because it's the most recent thing that was said, is like, I think that is an idea that we don't have the time for, but we could spend the next month digesting, and that could be a letter in itself of like, hey, here's how we could take that concern, which is a well-founded concern of like, how are we making sure the construction of this, that's a process concern, how to make sure it's not super disruptive, and we could write a whole letter on that. And I think that is a better way of, even fifth time reframing what I was saying earlier of like, I'm hesitant to write. I think what we're feeling a lot of is like, there's so many letters that we could write in here. What I was expressing earlier is like, I want to make sure we don't just write one that like isn't actually that impactful to this whole process. I think I'm seeing a possible nice compromise in my head of a letter that takes some of the initial high-level ideas we fleshed out here and says, hey, we think there are a lot of important pieces about Project Downtown. We think they're important for next gen. We would like to be involved in them and like have checkpoints on it. And we don't know how all of these pieces fit into the dialogue, but here is a bullet point list of ideas we have had talking through some of this that have some amount of consensus, or even some of the areas that have split consensus or something like that. And I think a way we could get to that still by March, because I don't think we're like quite here yet, is like open to feedback on this process, is like, we could do a two-step process between now and March, and everyone send in, you would have to keep them short, but like one, like literally a bullet point sentence of the like,
So hard.
city should explore, like should make sure that the phased approach to Project Downtown does not overly negatively impact downtown businesses. And it's like, are we getting all the nuance of that point across in that point? No, but we are expressing that that is a concern for us. And that's something that we would like to like be brought in on. We want it, you know, my point from earlier, we want to make sure the designer has a background on that. And then I can compile that list and like recirculate it, and everyone could individually kind of mark which ones they agree with or disagree with, and we could come back in March with a list. If here are the ones with unanimous consent, we for sure want to recommend to council, and then here are the ones that we can note have 3-3 split agreement. And that way, at least there's firm recommendations going to council there of like, here are the concrete points we're thinking about, even if we don't totally agree on them. And the fact that we're thinking about some of these points is why we kind of want to be kept in the loop. I see those two parts of the letter kind of marrying off of each other. Like, we really are thinking about these concrete things we would like to be hearing about. Some of them. We don't have to do that. That's just a plan of how I feel like we can go from this dialogue to like an actual deliverable.
I think that's a solid plan, to expand upon the plan. I think at the point this project is at, the like vibes-based suggestions of like trees, are still pretty useful, and helpful. Even just like overall, like, wow, this plan's really good. I love this plan. I think one of the big strengths and weaknesses of this plan is how piecemeal it is. Like, on one hand, it's great because you can do like one thing, like just trees. You could just replace the trees, call it a day and be done. And it'd be mostly fine.
An improvement.
So when it comes down to like budgetary reasons and how much money everybody's gonna spend, and how much we wanna do, there's probably gonna be a list of things that get done and a list of things that probably don't get done. So just being like, wow, I really like this thing, generally pushes that thing, towards higher on the list of, okay, actually, no, we do want to do that. So the point being, I think there is some value in the general expressions. I think there is also very much, we basically have to include specific recommendations. So if we had one part of the letter be, here's kind of just the general vibe, and then here are the specific recommendations we make for the plan, then I think we can follow that up with, and here's how you can keep us in the loop on here's like definite actions you can go take to keep us in the loop on these things from the first part, and then a little bit. But I think if you compose it of those three parts, I think that'd be pretty good.
I like that. I think that's a great way to start that conversation.
I just have two pushes.
Yeah.
One, I would just really challenge us to like not have this letter be the end all be all. Like, I personally be very sad of this as like the only communication this board gives to council on Project Downtown. Like, I think I am one side of understand the whatever the word, like the pressure per se, for lack of a better word, to like give a deliverable. I just don't want it to be like maybe like non-required pressure, because I feel like it has to be like this amazing deliverable. Like, even if we go back to that like every quarter, every 6 months with something about Project Downtown, like I think that's totally okay. Like, it's an ongoing project that's gonna impact the city for tens of years. Like, we should stay in the loop. And I 100% agree. Like, there 100% should be like a please come back to us with like more information as available type of thing. I think the other push is like, I actually would love to see like everyone's like detail. Like, I would personally like love to read it, and I don't know how it would work with like the law side of things. But like, I think maybe it should be like a group thing, even if we just look at like 2 weeks, whatever, we have like it's like 10-page thing because everybody's feedback, and then we kind of like go through, whittle it down, and then like whittle it down again. Like, I do think there's value in seeing those like diverse perspectives and being able to kind of like collectively as a group and say like, hey, I may not have thought about this, but I want to do more research, and now I feel like this is an important part. Like, I do think that should get the same level of like attention versus something that we all at the surface level agree to. So like, those are just my two pushes.
No, I think that's great. I think I definitely, I think I want to never put pressure on us as a board, even to turn over, like to deliver for the sake of delivering. I actually see the value of a deliverable at this point to be kind of self-referencing. Like, I think if we actually deliver something that's a little more concrete, it has some amount of concrete recommendations, that kind of shows, to me, that's a little bit of like, shows we mean business of like, yeah, we really have ideas on this. We have been thinking about it. We can like throw out specific recommendations that are high level prioritization vibes and down to like, hey, here's a designer recommendation. And it's like, those are, if I were city staff, I would be more excited to want to come talk to us if we've shown that we can like give concrete recommendations than just like, hey, we really want to like be involved in the process. So I think to that point, like, yeah, I don't think we should put pressure on, it has to be, we give them 3 bullet points of like, you should hire this designer, you should make sure to prioritize trees. We all agreed on that, and like minimize disruption. I know those are all just we talked about right here, but it's like, that's enough. That's again a good, if you're sitting on council, you're going, 7 younger residents in our city just told me that those are like really important things. Maybe I didn't consider those top of my list. I'm gonna like read that your perspective. So yeah, I don't think there's any pressure on like how that could go. I like the idea. I like the idea of being able to like dialogue about these things. I think that's where we run up against like the time challenge of like, we could just keep bringing new points I think we've probably done that for the past few months is I have a new idea about it, and so that kind of takes some time, so I think that's fun and exciting. I like learning from you all in terms of just different viewpoints as well as like stuff you know about, but like we're not gonna get anywhere if we do that. So I would love to carve out time though, of like if we do that bullet point list recommendation and kind of like put together some of those ideas to like save time even after we've like agreed on what we're gonna send to you. Anybody want to share more nuance to your point, or anybody have any questions about some of these? Not that it's gonna change what we're sending, what we're doing, but I'm like, just to change information.
I have a thought on that. And I shouldn't be the one giving this thought because I'm not gonna be here next year. But just a way to maybe do that is like, you do start out with like, okay, what for us is like Littleton's identity? Start with that as like city council, like this is like the identity we think is true to Littleton. And then the next letter is, here are the bullet points of recommendations that we think are going to create the identity we talked about in letter A. And then letter C could be like, this is our focus on trees. Here are concerns about it, like how are you like, when you're drilling these streets, should you be creating a underground system or doing something to ensure that these trees can survive? Here are the statistics on why trees are good. And then like continue to break those items down.
Yeah,
all
I
the time.
it would, let me know if this is along the line you're thinking, like. We can put together a bullet point list now, we can circle back with the new board. We can submit that list in the meantime. And we can see if, as part of the agenda for the year for that new board, there's like, hey, you know, these points that we're like, we wanna put together a white paper on, we wanna like really dig in deep of like, yeah, we know we told council we think trees are important, now let's write a 4-page brief on like, just how important they are. Just what we think, you know, are the key considerations, like stuff like that, like, is that kind of?
Yeah, kind of just you keep like honing in because then,
We could use that as a template of like, yeah, actually, we think, you know, this part of this bullet point is actually really relevant this year. Now we can do a deeper follow-up.
and you're able to provide the meat without getting lost in. Because like you said, there's either too much detail or there's not enough. And that's how you can kind of.
I think that approach is very smart too, because then if there's a consistency coming from next gen, then that becomes a natural reaction when they're like, oh, we're talking about this part of Project Downtown. Well, we didn't hear from NCAP about it. Right? Let's go ask. Let's go have that conversation. So I think that does a really good job of inviting that conversation to be continued, right, without that pressure that you're talking about. So I mean, I'm a big fan of that. And just because you won't be here next year doesn't mean that your great idea is.
I'll just keep sending you letters, 10 pages.
Is there a way to share everyone's like thoughts with and stay in line of all the rules?
So what I'm thinking about for this process, I don't know why this all came together really fast in my head, is like, I would be open to the idea, you know, within reason, but I also don't wanna say like you have to limit it to like 5. If everyone like could put together whatever their bullet points are, and I think that's, for my own sanity, probably I'll say it is like, make it a one-liner. Whatever you're gonna say, make it a one-liner. So we can expand on it if we really want to, but of like, the trees example, even though that's a abstract idea, the one-liner of that is something like, we want to ensure council prioritizes the tree canopy of downtown. That's a condensed one line. If you'll submit those to me by a reasonable time, or me and Ricky, it is pretty easy to slap all of those in a form. Resend out the form, and then we need to have you all go through it at some point. Or have a meeting and check the line that you don't agree with that. Don't check the ones you disagree with, and like that could be the basis for formatting this part of the letter of like, we have consensus on all these points, and then we can decide based on how many don't have consensus, whether those are even worth including, or whether we just leave that section off because we have enough with the consensus points.
Yeah, sounds good.
concrete. It could go wrong, but it'll mean we have a list of points that we could submit.
I don't
Next
think
month.
it can go wrong. I think it's the fact that we're moving forward.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, really, we're, last month, we were trying to capture everything. This has been one of the conversations, like, this is it. One.
I third that idea.
So, yeah, do that. And when should we be submitting that stuff to Ricky?
I'll send out an email with a reminder on it since Michael's not here especially. Let's see, your next meeting's the 5th.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we just send a follow-up email tomorrow?
Yeah.
And then we'll say, whatever we publish, just an agenda.
Probably 19th, 20th, get the ideas to me. It'll be quick to turn around and that'll give people a few days if they want to sit on it and go, it takes you longer than a quick glance to look at it and go, do I agree with this point or not? I'll probably want to do some secondary research on a few points or things, so.
Yeah.
I will say roughly in 2 weeks. And I will also flag of again, if you have a lot of ideas, great. If you have 2 ideas or no ideas, that's fine. Your contribution can still be adding the consensus to other people's ideas. I support that thing. So there's no merit to how many ideas you put in.
Can I,
Look at it.
well, we're just running out of time, so I think that's a great plan. I think that's what we should stick to, but I just want to throw out something that when I was writing my 10-page letter, I kind of kept going back to. And this is me just adding it at what's probably an inappropriate time because we're limited on the amount of meetings we have. But something I really did keep thinking about is what is Littleton's identity? What's our personality? What's our storyline? And I think there's opportunity to create more of one for Littleton. For example, Cherry Creek, they're the restaurant hub, they're the shopping, high-end shopping restaurant hub. Pearl's I'm gonna be blanking now, but I just was in Carmel. It's known for being the most dog-friendly place in the USA, and people bring their dogs. They're at the restaurants. The patios are great. If you get on Instagram and follow any of their shop, it just blows up because it's this dog-friendly place. So I started looking into how much value add is there by becoming the dog-friendly place in Colorado, because everyone here has dogs. But there really aren't that, besides breweries, there's not that many dog-friendly places, and dog-friendly often equals kid-friendly. So creating an identity like that, or urban garden centers and these connections between
The restaurant.
the restaurants and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's just something to a seed to plant in the back of everyone's mind is what could the storyline be that separates us from all the other places. And if you look at places that do have a stronger storyline, their businesses tend to excel, and there's this trickle effect in the community that's really kind of fun.
So I almost don't think it's that complicated. The implementation of this plan is really, really, really complex, but the problem you're trying to solve with this plan is really simple. You want people to show up, and you want people to stay.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that is produced by just getting those two things, and then people will just go wild. They'll make businesses, they'll start community stuff. You really need the people, the whole, you build it and they shall come. You just need to have places where people want to be, and then those people will build those sort of identities and community and all that jazz.
But I think for example, for the dogs thing, I think it is something that should be a priority just because that's so much of the traffic we do see. But creating patio spaces, that's when they come, is when there's a good patio space. And in the winter, we lose that patio space. So if there's infrastructure for good heaters, that's usable space that you're getting
that much more business out of because you're able to use it year round. So like, I agree, that is the point, but I think there's a lot of details. I think there's specific things you have to build to create that environment, otherwise people would be coming now,
I mean, they.
or there wouldn't be the
they-
need
they
to do
Quite a bit.
any changes.
But then there wouldn't be empty storefronts if enough people were coming down. Like, we would be attracting the right places that, like, the tavern, that's like a huge restaurant on a corner, great location, and that hasn't been filled yet.
I mean, true, but. That's Snarfs. All of the, I believe, I'm not entirely sure how it works, but I do believe all of the western side, like, business storefronts are being filled, like, actively, even before they're completed. Like, the jewelry store just is going in right now. The other thing that's going in right now. I think there's another thing that's going in right now, I don't remember. Oh, the bank is going in right now. So like, I think we are attracting people. We can just do a better job at it.
Yeah. I think that is the point, is like, how can we do a better job of it?
I think that's a conversation to bring in with the businesses out too. Right? There's the cost of operating, new licensing. There's, a lot of that stuff too that has been to consider.
Making the permitting process easy for restaurants, because
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's.
it's important though, right? I mean, I think back to my time abroad, and if there was a vacant alleyway, slapped a, cover over it, install the heater, and there you go. Different country, different laws in terms of how that went about, but there's no reason that we can't. We're encouraging businesses who maybe are saying, gosh, I really wish I could keep people a little bit longer. A little bit outside the box. It makes me think back to like the COVID days, right? It was very, very creative.
Yeah.
They found ways to make it work. It's to somewhat against their will, but also like figure out how to make it work. So I think that's,
And like two of our biggest patios off Main Street are in Cali and the pho place.
For real.
For real. And their patios are in a parking lot and in the shade. And that could be worlds better.
So, yeah, I mean, some of that is outside of the scope of like what the city can control, but some of that, to shoehorn this into my idea is like, specific patio like recommendations, like that could be a bullet point. That could be something, and a high level bullet point could be something around like council should be considering how Project Downtown and other developments potentially are like tying into a sense of identity. Consensus may or may not be reached based on like whether or not how specific that idea is or like where that stuff goes, but it's like I have no problem signing on for agreement on that piece of like, yeah, city identity is an important piece in design. Absolutely. I think that that is very true for both longevity and other stuff. So yeah, I also think like if there's ever stuff like that, I know board term is like almost up, but it's like feel free to write up ideas on that too and send them to us, and we can still like keep circulating that or using that as a basis for a future project or other things too. So if that's
Plenty of pages of all our ideas.
And just, you only wrote 5 pages. It wasn't 10 like you had said.
There's enough for you to count, Ricky.
That's goals. On the other hand, wrote 6. So
I had a lot of pictures. I had so many pictures of
pictures. It was nice. But I think I do think that's a great point though. Is like, just because your term is an end, I mean, you still can't. I mean, you have access to your email. So, because I think there's a lot of great ideas that just can't. You don't have enough time to capture all.
Yeah, agreed.
But I do think the idea of get that list going, and then from there we can have the introduction to project how to keep the conversation going.
it's like I think this is a survey in a way from like a very abstract and lofty way, and I see that maybe not being a super impactful to council, and I see like a concrete list being something that makes them go, oh, we want to hear more about that idea or something like that. So it's like a little bit of a teaser of like, hey, if you brought us into the conversation more, we could really talk to you about trees.
I do think we had to do this to get to this point.
Totally. Yeah, I think we can only now probably go forward with making like concrete, specific recommendations because of how many things we've heard about and talked about with downtown. So I think it's all been in service of getting to a good point. Okay, yeah, we'll send out an email tomorrow or the next few days with like the specific follow-up instructions on that, but it'll be along those lines. I have something.
That was one item. We have 15 more. I'm just kidding.
Oh my God.
No. So the second one, again, around some community engagement. I've been noticing that city council members are having some of these community meetings. I'm sure you all remember last year when we kind of talked about that's something that this board is interested in, like attending. You know, I also was thinking in our position as being part of this advisory board, is that something that we, whether individually as a group, would want to consider attending to kind of represent and showcase our, what we do, because I think largely, by and large, we don't really know what the generation advisory board is. We can kind of assume, right? But, you know, we're not like really talking to many people about it. So I wanted to at least bring that up so we can talk about it at the board, or if you're individually interested, right, you can go and attend those meetings and kind of talk about the different things that you're having discussions on like tonight, because I think if there are those connections to the community, that's what going to help reinforce things like, you know, a project downtown letter or, you know, environmental waste conversation. But I did want to at least kind of bring that up to see if there was interest, because I know, you know, we're all busy individuals, but I know that there are passion areas. And so I wanted to see if that was something that I'm interested in doing, continuing, or if it's just kind of a moot point of like, hey, I've got my once a month Thursday nights with you all, and that satisfies me.
I guess I'd be curious if like what sorry, it's been a week. Near forwards, what the not intent, sorry, we're good. I literally had the word on the record screech. I guess kind of given like the purpose of the meetings is that, you know, for citizens to kind of connect with like the representatives, like I guess like more of where would, if any, like fit into that? Like, is it more like a one forum? Is it more like a town hall type of thing? That's just, I'll just be like my lack of understanding and knowledge of it, but or is it more kind of like things set up where people can come talk to us? I guess like what does that gauge?
Yeah, I mean, by and large, it's just a community where the city council member, you know, says, hey, I'm the representative of your district. What do you want to talk about? You know, and it's kind of open. And, you know, they're amorphous. And so that's why I was thinking, you know, our city council member was here tonight. I know she's hosting one a couple weeks, I think.
Yeah, I saw that LinkedIn.
And yeah, and so, you know, I was like, well, that's a great opportunity because that's our part, right? You know, and so that's where I was thinking if we maybe support her in that, there's opportunity for us to have, you know, questions that we can ask the representing NGAB, or just, you know, your individual standpoint. But I wanted to at least kind of bring that up as another engagement opportunity, totally voluntary, but, you know, those are those things that we, I think, sometimes don't hear or feel like we don't have the opportunity to talk to other citizens outside of our friends and, you know, maybe a couple other family members, but this is a good opportunity to kind of network. So I just want to put that out there. Like I said, I know some of us are not going to be continuing, but if we're remaining on, then that's something to be thinking about, those networking opportunities.
Yeah, I think there's a tricky balance of, I'll use the personal example to me of like, I go to Vibrant Littleton meetings every once in a while, and it's like, I have no issue with people in those groups, or for example, at these council meetings or other things like that, whether they're citizens or council members, like knowing I'm a part of this group. And it's like, I think what I want to make sure is that if we're doing anything as a next gen activity, it does kind of need board general agreement to it. In the same vein though, it's like, yeah, go. I think us as individuals should feel free to go talk to whoever you want. and solicit feedback and say, I am on the next gen board, or I am on an advisory board for the city. Tell me your ideas, whatever, like, you can frame it like that, where it's like, I'm not trying to communicate on behalf of the board, but I'm happy to take any of these ideas back to it. And I think that's something we have those report, at the end of the meeting, sharing ideas from settings like that, I think is fantastic and can be inspiration for like future projects. So yeah, I was gonna try to go to Roberts on Saturday. I don't know if I'll talk about anything or just sit there and observe and listen, but it's like, yeah, if there's stuff to bring back in March, if and that makes an impression on me, I'll make sure to mention it, so.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea of it, is like, where can we insert ourselves to learn and attend? And without saying like, well, let me tell you what we think, right?
Yeah.
More just like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I wonder if that's a conversation for March. So,
Yeah.
like I said, totally voluntary and up to you all, but I wanted to at least kind of share that if there's interest. I think it's a good opportunity to just kind of be involved here at a smaller setting, and then, to Bob's point, if there's something you're like, yeah, we should talk about that, right? Like, I heard a lot about trees, let's talk more about trees. Terrible. But anyway, that's what I have for that. So with that, I'll turn it over to any comments from the board.
Where and when is that? Where and when is he holding that on Saturday?
Just saw it too before I left.
The budget meeting,
Yeah,
it's at Venus,
you missed.
Saturday, 10 to 11:30. It's on the city calendar. And probably a good idea to just go to the city calendar and look at those meetings every week.
I had some random things for my report. One, oh, this is great. If you need inspiration for the bullet points, the next study session on the 10th, there is a planned update around Main Street improvements, and it's very tied to Project Downtown. It is I've looked at the slide deck posted for it. It is very not specifics. It's basically an overview of like, here's how we're gonna actually start going about it. Here's where council decisions are gonna probably start landing over the next few months, things like that. So if you wanna look at that on the 10th when it comes out and that's recorded, that could probably be a great source of super concrete teases. Other piece, I didn't put it on the agenda for today because I didn't know if I was actually gonna get it done with this meeting or not, but I kind of added a lot to my even year election letter. So I'm not gonna talk about it in too much depth, but I'll send that as part of the follow-up email. I'd love to get new eyes on it before March. And again, I'm happy to, if you have any feedback, feel free to send that to me like over email. And we'll just circle back in March to see if that's something that if there's generally consensus on it, or if there's minor modifications or stuff like that. So be expecting that, and yeah, love some eyes on that piece. And that's all I got. Oh, no, the Littleton Boulevard stakeholder group meeting is kicking off next week, and I'm gonna be on that, so I don't think it'll be wildly productive like first meeting, but I will report back on that in March. If anyone on this board, which really is due to who are staying on, wanted to be an alternative on that meeting, they said you're really welcome to like come to the first meeting. We don't have to have an alternative, but the alternative, basically, if I can't make one of the meetings going forward, it'd be nice to still have somebody from Next Gen going to those, so. If that's of interest, let me know, and you can try to, it's next Thursday, it's from 6 to 7. Yeah. If you wanna go, let me know, I can talk to them and get you added on, but no pressure on that. Open invite. That's all I got. Yeah.
All right.
Something good.
Yeah, you're good. I will say, for me, so, for those who are staying on into the next term, we do have that 3A subcommittee, and Next Gen is also a seat at that. I've been in the seat for the last 2 years. It's actually really fun to go through and like line item what costs have been allocated and spent. So with that, there's gonna be a vacancy, and I know that we're also gonna have future board members on the way, but also for those of you who are here about that, that's one that you want to attend. It's two or three meetings. And basically, you go through line by item, draft a letter that they present to city council. So it's a cool experience to see where the money is being invested, and an opportunity for you to kind of represent this board. So food for thought, but I wanted you all to kind of be aware of that. That is something that take place come April. With that though, I will say great discussion tonight. I think we took something that was very amorphous and tried to dwindle it down into something concrete. So I appreciate your continued efforts to make that happen. I got a sense of, like I said initially, there's a lot of passion and excitement around this. So I appreciate all our efforts to bring that forward, and we'll just keep it working down to showcase what we think this should look like in future generations to come. With that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. So thank you all for all you do. Appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.